Brain development from prenatal through the first 3 years, including implications for parents and teachers. Presented by Callie Pope,
Michelle Torres,
Nikki Polidario Harris.
I am Scarlett Lozano Urrea.
the prenatal period at a glance. This is taken from our textbook, Berger 2021. What we're seeing here is the forebrain at 25 days, some more growth at 50 days. At 100 days, it looks more like a brain. 20 weeks, it's halfway developed. And by 38 weeks to full term, which is typically about 40 weeks, you start seeing the cortex. So the developmental stages at 2 weeks after conception, you start to see the neural tubes form and develop into the central nervous system. The central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. We also start seeing the head, the eyes, the ears, the nose, and the mouth. And you can start feeling the heartbeat. Day 100, brain formation begins. At week 28, brain activity begins. Various parts of the brain are recognizable. And at 40 weeks, the brain is fully formed. The cortex and its folds, the gyri and sulci, are developed. Adverse effects on brain development in the womb. If a mother is under or over nutritioned, that can affect the brain. Undernutritioning typically happens in poorer countries where there's not as much access to food and nutritional food. We don't talk as much, but obesity in the mother can impair neurodevelopment and executive functioning. The executive functioning is in the prefrontal cortex, and that's typically not fully developed anyway within the womb, but that can be affected. Diabetes can also increase the incidence of neural tube defects. And that's why any of you moms or other people out there, halfway through, typically we get a test to see if we even have what's called gestational diabetes. Infection can also have an adverse effect on brain development. For example, untreated genital herpes can cause an adverse effect on the neurodevelopment. Maternal stress, long-term effects on the function of the hypothalamic, pituitary, and adrenal axis. And this is all the functioning different parts up in our brain. The period of prenatal where we can have healthy brain development through a healthy diet. Typically what happens with a healthy diet is you are eating a little bit more and you're trying to maintain high nutrient foods. Vaccinations actually can also help protect the baby because it helps prevent infections in the women, which then helps the fetus. Pregnant moms need to maintain healthy weights, and we talked a little bit about that if you're not healthy. But I know that gaining 3 pounds the last trimester per week or per week, I'm going to have to check on that. I'm sorry, or per month, but it is 3 pounds, but it is healthy there is a healthy weight to gain during pregnancy. So the goal is not to not gain weight, and it's also not to go nuts and gain a ton of weight. Also, something that's super helpful in the diet for brain development is folic acid, and they recommend taking about 400 micrograms. And the other thing is just creating a happy, healthy environment where there is laughter. Sometimes we can't have that all the time. And so exercise, going on walks, taking baths that aren't too hot, listening to music that's soothing, it can also help with a happy environment.
All right, so we're going to talk about the brain development in the first year of a child. So from the textbook and other resources, we learned that when a baby is born, the size of their brain is about 1/4 or 25% of the size of the normal adult brain. And at 1 year, at 1 year old, it doubles in size, which is about half the size of that of an adult. According to the Arizona Early Childhood Development and Health Board on their website called First Things First, that 90% of growth happens before of brain growth happens before kindergarten. So a newborn baby has all of the brain cells or neurons they'll have for the rest of their life, but it's the connections between these cells that really make the brain work. So the early childhood years are crucial for making these connections because at least 1 million neural connections or synapses are made every second, more than at any other time in their life. So different areas of the brain are responsible for different abilities, and I want to talk about those abilities that develop during the first year of a child's life. And I divided them into 3 different categories, which is physical, cognitive, and psychosocial development. So first, physical development. Next slide. So the infant's body size doubles by 4 months and triples by 1 year. This is the year babies learn to do the basic abilities such as grasping objects and rolling over and crawling, as we see in our babies. It is also during the late months of the first year that babies start to grow teeth and learn to feed themselves by using their fingers. And according to UNICEF, by 1 year old, normal babies should have learned to take a few steps without support and sit up without support and walk while holding on to furniture. Yeah, so the second is cognitive development. Yeah. So even during the first year of a child's life, they already love to explore. They use their eyes and mouth and to explore their environment and use them in coordination. At 8 to 12 months, they start to learn to use objects in the correct way. They also start to imitate gestures that we do and correlate an image or an object with a word. So 1-year-olds are also attracted to mechanical objects when they play, and they like games that are that will challenge them but not completely beyond their abilities. And according to Urban Child Institute, babies also start to learn about important ideas like cause and effect. And they also develop a sense of safety and security. And that brings us to psychosocial development. Erickson's ideas, as we remember in the first chapter or the first week that we learned about the different theories. So Erickson's ideas, he said that from birth to 1 year, babies either trust that others will satisfy their basic needs, including nourishment, warmth, cleanliness, and physical contact, or develop mistrust about the care of others. So depending on how their needs are met, they will develop either a secure or insecure attachment, which we will learn about in the coming weeks. But here's a chart from the textbook showing what and when certain types of emotions are developed during the first year. So at birth, newborns experience distress or discomfort when they are hungry, tired, or frightened, and they feel relaxed and content when they are fed and drifting off to sleep. After a few weeks, they start to express happiness by a social smile, and they soon learn to laugh and be curious and express a more responsive smile when we make a funny face or when they discover new things. At 4 to 8 months, infants can experience anger, usually triggered by frustration, and they can also get sad. And at 9 months until about age 2, we can usually see babies observing like fearing strangers or being shy, or when their parents or caregiver leave them. So yeah, that's about it.
All right, and for brain development in the second year of life, beginning at 2 years old, these young children begin to experience a massive boost in the maturation of their prefrontal cortex. So this is also known as neurological control, and this has a lot to do, well, has everything to do with myelination, which, as Nikki was saying, it really has to do with the brain forming all of those connections and growing. So in that time, sleep will become more regular, emotions become more controlled and responsive rather than random. Their temper tantrums begin to subside, and they really begin to even control their laughter and yeah, just cry less in general. So that was from our textbook. And next. All right, so as far as cognitive development goes, I really chose to focus on Piaget's sensory motor period. And this is when children use their senses to explore the world around them. In this study by Coster and Kartner, they talked about how the onset of the helping behavior is really indicative of brain development in all kinds of different aspects of a child's life. So as children are learning to help, they begin to develop skills such as empathy and, concern for others. They also have social cognition. So that means they're understanding others' needs and how they can use their own skills to help people. Social interaction, just, they learn from others. So for example, if your kid sees you sweeping, he might try and steal the broom and sweep. He's trying to help, but he's, that's one way that they exhibit social interaction. And then cultural learning, as they learn to serve others, they really begin to have this onset of the helping behavior. So in this chart right here, we can see a bunch of gray lines, and the onset of the helping behavior is all in the middle of them. So the gray represents when children really start to feel these certain emotions and understand these concepts of empathy and social learning and that kind of thing. And we can see that the helping behavior really correlates with all of those skills. So that's a good sign. We should always be helping our children to help, and it has really proven effective in helping brains develop, especially in the second year of life. Okay, next. All right, and this slide has a lot to do with the epigenetics in the second year of life. So I kind of constructed this graph to describe what's happening in this paragraph right here. So I'll kind of explain. What this is saying is that your environment is crucial to the way that your brain develops. So for example, on this graph, on the y-axis, I've written the connections and circuits that are open for change. So we all know that little kids are always eager to learn. They're always anxious to be doing something. And so this is representing that, the connections and circuits that are really open and searching for that stimulation. And then on the x-axis, we have the time and exposure to the preferred stimulus. So for this example, we'll be using the alphabet, singing your ABCs, right? It's super important that you're teaching your children how to sing their ABCs, right? Even before they go to preschool or kindergarten. It's been proven that, and in this study, they even highlighted that, even before they can speak, children begin to recognize patterns in speech and counting. So it's important that we introduce those things early on. Beginning in the second year of life, they really begin to really notice those patterns. And for the alphabet, for example, we notice the green line. So let's say I start teaching my 2-year-old how to sing his ABCs right here at the top of the green line. Over time, we can see that, right when he's 2 years old, he's super receptive to singing his ABCs. And even though he might not be able to express that, he enjoys it, right? His brain is appreciating the connection. As we move forward, so maybe the end of this green line can represent, let's say, maybe like 3 or 4 years old, they begin to, the brain has less room for the connections. So it's super important that we introduce these concepts early on so that their brain has made room for these connections and that it's connecting for the right reasons, rather than filling that space with something else, because those connections will be happening whether or not you're singing the ABCs to your child. But they'll have less room for the ABCs if you start later. So that's what this blue line is representing. If I start at 2 years old with my son and help him learn the ABCs, and then I stop randomly at like 3 years old and I never sing the ABCs to him again, well, we see that he's going to have a lot of space, a lot of connection that is filled with something other than the ABCs. Same thing goes with the second part of the blue line. If I only start singing the ABCs at 3 years old and go to 4 years old, they're going to have a lot less room to let the ABCs make sense, because their brain has already used a lot of that space to make other connections. So it's really important that we introduce these preferred stimuli at the beginning, of the second year of life. Okay, next. And then as far as psychosocial development is concerned, I used an example of restrictive parenting versus warm and responsive parenting from Blandin et al. In 2010. And they were talking about the importance of not necessarily being a helicopter parent and letting your children, kind of have their own personality and letting them explore the world. Because as we learned in the last slide, the last couple slides actually, having the sensory motor period, they need to be constantly doing something. And so as a parent, these are some behaviors that you can implement in your parenting to make sure that your child has more positive outcomes as they begin to be an older child, even into adolescence. So restrictive parenting in the second year of life usually leads to aggressive behavior from children, negative emotions, non-compliance, poor peer relationships, and lower levels of empathy in older children. And then warm and responsive parenting usually results in children that are more likely to engage in pro-social behavior. So they are sociable, they're usually kind, they're less aggressive, they do exhibit appropriate emotional expressiveness. So they don't just say random things, they're very aware of their situation. And then they utilize better emotion regulation skills. So they're very thoughtful and and they're just better at regulating their emotions overall. And then I found this graphic in our textbook, which is a toddler, and he's, using a welding tool to write "I need love" into the wall. And the mom says he's just doing that to get attention, which a toddler might do something like that, right? Like we all know toddlers are getting into things all the time. But in this particular study, it was talking about how it's important that we are, helping our children lead the way. I mean, we're leading the way for our children, helping them understand the right way to go, and that we don't just ignore them, because when we are responsive, they begin to make connections that help them to be more personable, that help them to be more kind. All outcomes that parents search for. So, yeah.
Okay, I am Scarlett. I am going to explain about the implication to parents. This is an structure about Martin 2017 studies of cases of application in the educational stage of neurodevelopment and neuropsychological basis of learning, Mendes Pelayo International University, Spain. Guidance for parents, observations and reviews make it possible to detect disharmony early and correct them before they can lead to a more organized physical, emotional, or mental disorder. We have to assume a harmonious development of the baby during the first 2 years of life. Pay special attention to the development of movement control, coordination, and automation mechanisms because their dysfunction severely after the integration of the body scheme and orientation in space. It is not enough to label a clumsy child. We must help him so that he is not. There are 3 stages of a child's life that are especially important for prevention. The first is the neonatal period, the first 18 months of life. At birth, after 9 months of gestation, the baby must have reached a level of neurological development sufficient to be able to adapt to the extrauterine environment. After delivery, the baby has to begin to solve vital problems on its own. It has to be able to organize harmonic sleep and wake rhythms and to adapt its body positions to the pressure of Earth's gravity. Observe the first 18 months of life. Detect whether the delivery has left sequelae of malpositioning of the skull bones, in which case we advise the collaboration of a specialist in osteopathy. Check if the level of sensory and rhythmical maturity is correct and if he is ready to face the new way of life. Parents need some guidance on how to treat him, evaluate their level of sensitivity and to which model of brain reaction it responds to in order to adapt the stimulation to their needs and to their integration capacities. The goal is to avoid excessive stimulation, to which many babies are subjected today. It is a good time to carry out preventive observation and exploration. The objective is to get children to learn to roll over by themselves, not to sit them down too early, to learn to crawl and crawl before walking, etc. The primary aims is to personalize the development of the first years of life to the maximum and to avoid the frequent psychomotor problems, bad positioning of the back, feet or legs, as well as to avoid or solve problems of irritability and REMS disturbance, mainly REMS of food and sleep. The next, please. Another especially important moment is that of 2 years. At this age, the child has greatly developed his movement and control of the body. He has become being able to stand perfectly on both legs and remain upright with a good balance between flexions and extensions of his body. It is a good age to determine the level reached and the level of organization of the false reflexes. Level of body control, check if when walking, you are able to coordinate the right arm with the left leg and vice versa. This form of motor coordination is essential to start jumping, running, and pedaling, and for the organization of language to be sufficiently rich. It is important to assess the degree of binocular development. And 2 years old, he should be able to construct a single image from 2 eyes. This ability to unify the function of the 2 visual pathways is the basis for being able to measure space well and orient oneself. It is a good age to make an assessment of the level of organization of your rings and the ability to control your body and your behavior. There are still a few months to go before he becomes aware that he is different being from his environment. You will soon be fully aware of many phenomena that up to that point you have been aware of and perceived without realizing that you were doing so. It is a good time to prevent the appearance of attention and hyperactive problems. For example, I have 3 examples. The intervention program consists of the following. From the 0 to 3 months, we have differentiated spaces, scarce material, and activities, fluor stage. And from 6 to 18 months, we have differentiated spaces, psychomotor, and dynamic materials, activities in different positions. And from the 18 to 24 months, we have differentiated spaces, more varied materials, and displacement activities. The next slide, please. Okay, implication for teachers. The activities are decided based on the understanding of brain development and are intended to enhance the cognitive, emotional, and social development of children. And there are many benefits of applying this principle in education. The most outstanding may be, for example, the next slide, please. Okay, we have five characteristics. For example, 1, understanding the functioning of the main axis of learning, the brain. When we understand the principle of brain development, we learn to design activities and direct day-to-day interactions to promote the development of executive functions, which are two foundations of learning, self-regulation, and intelligence. The second is detect failures in the development of executive functions. Executive functions are a series of mental abilities that allow us to act in a controlled and voluntary manner instead of following our impulses or instincts. The development of executive functions is essential for life, and when teachers know that mental process involved and also know their development process, they are also able to detect the maturational moments of children and detect if something in their development is not happening, giving us it should. This allows them to take actions aimed at reinforcing these processes and therefore prevent the difficulties that usually emerge when children reach primary school and face the processing of more abstract concepts. The third is understand the hierarchical development of the brain and adapt the concept to this. When we understand this, we know how to focus our work on promoting mental and social emotional skills that will allow the child to develop that more complex or higher order skills that they will need throughout their lives. And the fourth is highlight the importance of prioritizing skills over knowledge. It is important that in this period, the child manipulates, touches, smells, feels, and about all that he learned through experimentations with the world around him. It is also a fundamental period to reinforce process of emotional regulation and tolerance to frustrations. So social relationship and the challenge they entail represent a very important development opportunity. This understanding allows us to tip the balance of our actions in the classroom to give priority to strengthening children's mental abilities through tools as simple at the same time as powerful as project-based learning, theater, literature, music, dance, and even free plays. And the final is the strengthened joint work with mothers and fathers. Studies shows that children's interactions with their parents or caregivers are critical to their brain and mental development, applying the principle of neuroeducation in the classroom. We are able to offer parents practical tools to accompany and reinforce at home the learning process that are taking place at school. And we can also answer your question with solid arguments based on understanding their children's brain development. The next slide, please. And this is the final slide, is the application to parents and teachers and reference bibliographic. And that's all. Thank you.